You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. And maybe that's a good thing, because that means that you're not a Brooklyn Nets fan. Look, I remember getting destroyed by the Lakers in 2002. The year after that, losing to the Spurs. The year after that, losing to the Pistons. How about the Bulls? Derrick Rose out. Nate Robinson, Kirk Heinrich, and Joakim freaking Noah killed the Nets. All those losses combined do not equal the heartbreak that loss on Saturday caused. You want to talk about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat? I was at the Coliseum. Alright, I was there for Game 4. I had one eye on the Nets game. Every whistle, go to the phone, see how the Nets are doing. Hey, they're winning! They're going to do this! They're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals! The Bucks just never go away. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When the score was 3-0, even 3-1, I had the Nets game on my phone. I had the TNT app. Then when it was 3-2, it's like, okay, I have to pay attention to this. I'm still checking the Nets at every whistle, but when it was 3-2, I was watching the Islanders. Then after the game, after Pollock made one of the greatest plays in Islanders history, get back on TNT, and as I'm walking back to the car, all the Islanders fans are celebrating. I'm about ready to rip my hair out. As the waning seconds of the fourth quarter, back and forth, Kevin Durant hits the fadeaway over PJ Tucker. I'm driving home. My father called my mother and said, listen, have the door open. Have channel 551 on. Jacob's gonna come running in to watch overtime of Game 7. I had the game recording, but I wanted to watch overtime live. Watching that overtime was one of the worst experiences of my life. There is no question about that. You have two of the best players in the NBA. The best three-point shooter in the NBA. And the only guy who can score in the most important overtime in Nets franchise history is Bruce freaking Brown. I'm not knocking Brown. I like Brown. Good player, has gotten a bad rap. But someone else needs to step up. For the love of God! Kevin Durant hits an improbable shot to send the game to overtime. You were riding him all game. You had to. Where was James Harden? I understand that he couldn't shoot. I'm not asking him to shoot. I'm asking him to get to the free throw line. Where's Joe Harris? In overtime, Harris had a wide open three from the wing. I'm talking shooting practice. Nope. And this is the big one. Where's Kyrie? He has a freaking sprained ankle. James Harden is out there on a grade 2 hamstring strain. Kyrie, I've put up with a lot of your nonsense. You need to take some time off because of what happened at the Capitol. You go out to celebrate your sister's birthday. All the other games you missed. I put up with it. I'm asking you to play just a little bit in a Game 7. That's it. That's all I'm asking. No one said you had to play 53 minutes. If you play 10, it doesn't even have to be consecutive. Just 10 minutes. The Nets win this game in regulation, and they are beating the Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. You cannot tell me that the Nets wouldn't destroy the Hawks. I mean, this was set up perfectly for the Nets. The path of least resistance. No Sixers. No Kawhi Leonard. The Suns aren't world beaters. No one steps up. The freaking bench doesn't take a shot. The whole offense was Durant. I understand it's a Game 7, and Kevin Durant is one of the best players in the NBA, okay? I get that it should be mostly on him. But wouldn't you like someone else to step up just a little bit more? You know, I could forgive all of it. Literally all of it. If Steve Nash had called a timeout. We got on Ty Lue for not calling a timeout in Game 1 against the Jazz. We need to get on Steve Nash. The most important moment of the Brooklyn era. You have a golden opportunity to get just a little bit of rest for these guys. 60 seconds. You can draw up a play. You can advance the ball. Make sure that you get Durant the look that you want him getting. No one wanted Kevin Durant to take a turnaround jumper over PJ Tucker to send the game into overtime. I mean, people were saying, oh, Durant's feet are too big, that's why. It was a 2. I mean, you've got to know where you are on the court. Come on, what are you doing? Do you have any idea how hard that shot is? For anyone. That is an incredibly tough shot. So let's do it again. Let's have Durant hit another turnaround jumper over Jrue Holiday, who played it perfectly. You saw what Tucker did. It didn't work, so he altered his approach. Jrue Holiday's a good defender. It comes up woefully short. You know why it came up short? Because Durant was exhausted. The guy played 53 minutes, single-handedly carried the Nets to overtime, and he was just gassed. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't get any more on that shot. It couldn't even touch the rim. You can't blame Durant for that. You can't blame Harden for not shooting well. The guy was playing on a grade 2 hamstring strain. Okay, it's a hamstring that's bothered him all year. He tried to gut it out. He was still solid. He didn't embarrass himself out there. I'm not knocking him. The reality is, though, this loss is on Steve Nash. And when you have title aspirations and you make that decision to not call a timeout, to play Joe Harris 46 minutes, to not get your bench involved, you've got to be held accountable for that. Steve Nash needs to go. Yeah, one and done. I am being completely serious right now. Fire Steve Nash. He has not learned. His timeout usage was an issue all year. All freaking year. The biggest moment of his life. And he doesn't call a timeout. I know exactly what he would say. Oh, we didn't want the Bucks to get set. That's fine. You know what happens then, though? You don't get set. You're forced into taking an impossible shot. That wasn't a good shot. You didn't get a good look. If Durant had gotten a wide open look or an easy opportunity and he just missed it, okay, that decision by Nash worked. And then the story is, you know what, Durant literally gave it all he could. He was just too tired. At the end of overtime, he played 53 minutes. He had scored 48 points. It's understandable. That's not the story here. You can't fault Durant. Of course he missed that shot. He didn't want to get you to overtime. You think he's going to hit a second? Come on. When you're a team with title aspirations, your coach can't make any mistakes in the big moments. And Steve Nash made a lot of mistakes in Game 7. Not trusting his bench. All I heard throughout this year was how good the Nets' depth was. Well, if that's the truth, then trust them. Green, Shamet, Claxton, James, Tyler Johnson. Give them some run. Give them some chances. If you see that Joe Harris isn't getting the job done, find someone who can. Get someone who can create offensively into the game instead of Bruce Brown. The Bucks were torching the Nets from beyond the arc. They shot 42% from 3. I didn't see any adjustments. You know the worst thing to do when you have a team that's killing you from 3 is? Switch everything. Because if your teammate says, you've got this guy, and you don't hear it, or you hesitate just a little bit, wide open shot. I mean, I understand daring the Bucks to shoot. Because in Game 6, they were dreadful from beyond the arc. I understand that. But when you see them cooking in a Game 7, you've got to change up your approach. The Nets only had one defense the whole year. Switch everything. That's a bad job by Nash. That's a bad job by Jacques Vaughn. I just don't get it. And then you don't call a timeout. Did you learn nothing from Game 1 of Jazz Clippers? I mean, when you called a timeout at the end of regulation, Kevin Durant hit the tough shot over PJ Tucker. Yes, it wasn't a great opportunity, but he hit the shot. The decision to not call a timeout there very well may have cost the Nets this game. Look, we'll never know what would have happened if Nash had called a timeout. Maybe the Nets don't get the ball in cleanly. Maybe the Bucks defense is absolutely immaculate. But you've got to call a timeout there. That's one of those things where if it works, you look great. If it doesn't, you look like an idiot. And you can't take that chance in a Game 7 in a year where you had title aspirations. The Cleveland Cavaliers saw the writing on the wall with David Blatt. Pretty early on, they realized that he wasn't the right guy to coach LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. And you know what? Blatt had a lot more experience coaching than Steve Nash. They moved on from Blatt before 2 seasons had elapsed. You know what happened the year they fired him? Ty Lue took over and they won a championship. When you have a coach that can't get it done, and it's clear to me that Nash can't, he just doesn't have the coaching IQ to do it. He relied too much on his assistants. He was hired because he was a great communicator. What the hell does that mean? What does that have anything to do with winning? You're the head coach of an NBA team. You've got to know something about basketball. Nash was a great player, Hall of Famer. Not translating over. And that guy is coaching a roster that is talented enough to win an NBA title. I don't see any other option but to go in a different direction. With a guy like Rick Carlisle available, one of the best coaches in the NBA, someone who has won a title, something that Nash was never able to do, by the way. Okay, that does mean something. When that guy becomes available, you've got to go after him. When you have a shooter making an AAV of over $18 million and he goes cold from games 3 through 7, you've got to think long and hard about moving on from him. I mean, I don't want to hear anyone say that this was a successful season. It wasn't. This season was an abject failure. This was title or bust, and you didn't even make it to the conference finals. If you had lost in a Game 7 in that round, or a Game 7 in the NBA Finals, I could have maybe possibly accepted that. Not this. This is inexcusable, and you've got to make serious changes. The worst thing that the Brooklyn Nets could do is run this roster back, improve around the edges a little bit, and just say, oh, Nash is going to get better. He's a year smarter. Joe Harris isn't going to choke in the playoffs again. Durant, Harden, and Kyrie are going to have another year together. We'll get it done next year. You have absolutely no idea if any of that is true. Once you make that decision to move all your chips to the center of the table, which is what you did when you traded for James Harden, you have to follow down that path. You have to pursue improvements wherever they are. You cannot tell me that Rick Carlisle isn't as good a coach as Steve Nash. You can't tell me that Kristaps Porzingis wouldn't be a better fit for this roster than Joe Harris. I mean, I'll get into it more in the Nets offseason preview, which, pity me, because I did, no prep work for this prior to Game 7. There was that little voice in the back of my head saying, Jacob, they may lose this. This is a Game 7. Anything can happen. You may want to do some prep work. No, they're not losing this. It's in Brooklyn. They're the team of destiny. I'll be fine. Idiot Jacob strikes again. I know what I'm doing tonight and tomorrow night. I mean, I did do a little homework yesterday. That's where I came up with the Porzingis trade. I mean, look. Congratulations to the Bucks. To come back from 2-0 down against this Nets team is really impressive. I don't care that James Harden wasn't at 100%. I don't care that Kyrie Irving missed 3 games. You beat a great team. And now you're on your way to the Eastern Conference Finals. You'll get to steamroll the Hawks. And you'll be in your first NBA Finals since 1974. I mean, I'll say this. This has to give all the small market teams in the NBA a lot of hope. They just saw a team in the Milwaukee Bucks in the last 12 months re-sign their super duper star talent to a long-term contract. Make a big trade for a really, really good player in Jrue Holiday. And they just beat a super team. They won 4 of the last 5 games against this Nets team. I don't know if the NBA is going to like that. You can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it as super teams are bad for the NBA because it eliminates parity. Although now you can't say that because the super team just got eliminated. Usually super teams eliminate parity. That's the best way of saying it. 99.999% of the time, super teams eliminate parity. That's bad for a league. Alright, so the NBA may like that the Bucks eliminated the super team. But they may not like it because look at the Final Four now in the NBA. The Bucks, a team that less than a decade ago was the subject of relocation rumors. The Hawks. Atlanta cares more about Georgia football than any of their professional sports teams. Basketball is by far and away the lowest thing on the totem pole of Atlanta sports. Yes, Hawks fans are out in full force, but in the grand scheme of things, they really don't care too much. You've got the Suns. How excited can you be about Phoenix? That's not a big market. You have the Clippers, I get that. No Kawhi Leonard, though. That's tough. How many people are going to tune in to a Western Conference Finals game to see Paul George as the best player on the team? Especially when you've heard people pushing the narrative that George just isn't a good playoff performer. Now, he's proving that wrong now. There's no question. But how many casual NBA fans are going to know about that? When the best NBA Finals you can hope for from a marketing standpoint is Clippers-Bucks, that's tough. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm going to have a tough time getting into these conference finals. This is perfect for the NHL. If the NHL can't seize upon this, that's a bad sign for them. Because this Final Four, that's now in a best 2 out of 3 has more juice. You've got a New York team, the defending Stanley Cup champs, the newest team in the NHL, since the Kraken aren't technically a thing as of right now, and the most successful team in the history of the NHL that just so happens to play in Canada. A country that hasn't had one of its teams win a Stanley Cup Finals since 1993. A country that hasn't seen one of their teams in the Stanley Cup Finals since 2011. A country that even had all 6 of their teams miss the playoffs in the past decade. The NHL has more juice than the NBA right now. There's no question about that. Look, again, in all seriousness, congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't want to hear people throw caveats into this. Oh, if Harden had been at 100%. Oh, if Kyrie had played. Oh, if Dinwiddie had played, the Nets would have won. You're right, but that doesn't negate the fact that Harden wasn't at 100%. Kyrie missed 3 games. And Dinwiddie was out the whole year. Those guys getting hurt isn't the fault of the Bucks. They can only beat the teams that are put in front of them. If Harden isn't at 100%, if Kyrie isn't put out there, if Dinwiddie isn't put out there, that's not on the Bucks. Congratulations to them, but boy oh boy, am I going to be rooting hard for the Atlanta Hawks. The tumult that's surrounding the Brooklyn Nets right now is nothing compared to the tumult surrounding the 76ers. They just lost to a vastly inferior Hawks team. The gap between the Nets and the Bucks is nothing compared to the gap between the Sixers and the Hawks. I mean, that Game 7, that's a game that the 76ers should have won. You hold Trae Young to just 21 points, 5 for 23 from the field, 2 for 11 from beyond the arc. He turns the ball over 6 times. You should be able to win that game. But instead you let Kevin Huerter kill you, Danilo Gallinari kill you, John Collins kill you, Clint Capella kill you. Oh my gosh. I revised decades of dumbass decisions for the Nets over their loss to the Bucks. You can check that on Twitter at RealJacobValk. If I did that for the 76ers before yesterday, I'd revise it now. This is absolutely inexcusable. I mean, there are 2 big issues here with the Sixers. The reality is, this is more of a Sixers loss than a Hawks win. I don't want to take anything away from the Hawks. Okay? Congratulations to them. They're a really good team. Nate McMillan deserves to be with the Hawks for a long time. They did a really good job in the offseason getting better, adding Gallinari, adding Bogdanovic. Trae Young is just going to get better. Kevin Huerter is just going to get better. DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish are going to come back at some point in time. The future of the Hawks is incredibly bright. I mean, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, for goodness sake. They are on an upward trajectory. They probably have the brightest future out of any team in the NBA. I'm not overlooking the present. They can very well beat the Bucks. No one thought they'd beat the Knicks. They beat them. No one thought they'd beat the Sixers. They beat them. They can beat the Bucks. But the reality is, this is more of a Sixers loss. The 76ers all year were the best team in the Eastern Conference. They finished with the third best record in the league. I mean, with the Nets out of the picture, you had to feel really good about your chances as a Sixers fan. I mean, Sixers-Bucks? That's actually a conference finals I can sort of kind of get into a little bit. I mean, I hate the teams, but the storylines are there. We won't get to see it, though. There are two big reasons why the Sixers lost this series. The biggest reason being Ben Simmons. Doc Rivers isn't without blame. I mean, the reality is, this just furthers the notion that Doc Rivers is an overrated head coach. We're going to be hearing that a lot as this loss gets a chance to marinate. I mean, this guy hasn't made a conference finals since 2012. He hasn't made an NBA finals since 2010. I don't think anyone is saying that Doc Rivers is a bad coach. He's not. He's a good coach. He's a very good coach. But instead of looking at him as a guy who can get your team over the hump and win an NBA Finals, maybe we should be looking at this guy as a stage one guy. A guy who will get you to the playoffs and you'll win a round when you're there. But good luck getting past that. I mean, you had some really talented Clippers teams to work with. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, etc., etc. You never got them past the second round. You go to the Sixers. Joel Embiid has an MVP caliber season. Daryl Morey did a great job of addressing the needs of this team. He needed to add shooters. He added Seth Curry. He added Danny Green. He drafted Tyrese Maxey. Granted, Maxey isn't a shooter, but he has talent. Same thing with Dwight Howard. Curry and Green are shooters. Those guys are big reasons why the Sixers had the best record in the Eastern Conference. Instead, you lose a Game 7 at home to an inferior Hawks team. You only put up 96 points. That's a bad look. I mean, look, if I'm calling for Steve Nash's head, it's tough for me to say that Rivers should be safe also. It's the same logic. If you see that you need to generate offense, get your shooters out there. Rivers really didn't do that. He didn't have a great series. So yeah, I could be talked into firing Doc Rivers. But the reality is, I don't think he's the seminal reason that the Sixers lost this series. The seminal reason is the absolutely abhorrent play of Ben Simmons. This guy is setting new records in terms of futility. I'm not kidding. This is from ESPN Stats and Info. With a minimum of 70 attempts, Ben Simmons' 34.2% free throw percentage this postseason is the worst in a postseason in NBA history. If your game is driving to the hoop, you've got to be able to hit free throws. If you can't do that, then you know what your role in the league is? A defensive specialist. You're Andre Roberson. You're Bruce Brown. You're Matisse Thybulle. You can't be handling the ball. The reality is the best role for Ben Simmons is that of a defensive stopper off the bench. You can't have him playing 30 minutes a game. You've got to have him play 20. Have him key in on the opponent's best player and let him do that. But in terms of starting, I think we've learned that Ben Simmons just cannot do that. Look, we've said for years that Ben Simmons has needed a jump shot. But I don't think we ever looked at it as a make or break thing until now. I mean, I said last year, if you surround Embiid and Simmons with shooters, they'll be fine. We just learned that that is not true. Okay, it's good that the Sixers have shooters. If you take Ben Simmons out of the equation, Joel Embiid needs shooters to be effective. The Sixers are going to build around Joel Embiid. The notion of building around Ben Simmons instead of Embiid, which is what some people advocated for in the past, no, that is just wrong now. You need to build around Embiid. You need shooters. Who's not a shooter? Ben Simmons. You know how many field goal tries Ben Simmons had in the fourth quarter of all 7 games in this series? 3. Now, granted, he hit all 3 of them. So, hey, he's batting 1,000. Give him credit? Question mark? No, you can't. He's your point guard. He's the ball handler. And he's only shooting 3 field goals in the 7 fourth quarters in this series. He's supposed to be the second best player on the Sixers. You can't have your second best player shoot 3 total field goals in all 7 fourth quarters. There is no way around it. Write it in ink. Carve it in stone. The Philadelphia 76ers will trade Ben Simmons. The thing is, though, who's going to take him? He signed a huge max extension with the Sixers in 2019. That gave him an AAV of over $35 million. No one is going to pay $35 million for a guy whose best role is a defensive stopper. You want to tell me that he can still get better? We've been saying that for a long time, and he hasn't. The best case scenario for Ben Simmons is him just being a slasher. A guy who can drive to the hoop and make layups or draw contact and shoot free throws. The thing is, though, his free throw shooting is abysmal. Is that the kind of thing that can be worked on? Theoretically, yes, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't stuck with Simmons. Who knew that in a game where the goal is to shoot the basketball into the hoop, that it would be a bad thing to have a guy who can't do that on your team? The process failed. That's what this shows. If all you have to show for the process is Joel Embiid, and you've needed to completely reinvent the roster around him to make him successful? The process failed. You take a look at Embiid's supporting cast, excluding Ben Simmons. Tobias Harris wasn't a process move. Neither was Shake Milton, Curry, Green, Furkan Korkmaz, Tyrese Maxey, Dwight Howard. The process failed. Thank God. You don't want teams tanking to that extent. You just don't. That's bad for everyone. But now you're screwed because how are you going to convince anyone to take Ben Simmons? The only chance you have is a team that's not looking to make the playoffs, a team with a lot of cap room, and you kick in a first rounder and say, take Ben Simmons off my hands, please. I mean, I did think about Simmons with the Knicks, because the Knicks do need a point guard. But I don't see the Sixers trading Simmons to the Knicks. Same division, you'd see him too much. That just doesn't strike me as the kind of thing that Daryl Morey would do. Same thing with Simmons going to the Nets. I mean, look, we'll never know how close the 76ers were to trading for James Harden. But Ben Simmons was the centerpiece of that deal. So you could have traded Ben Simmons, some young guns, and some picks for James Harden. With Harden, you beat the Hawks. There's no question about that. Now you're going to need to, in essence, give Ben Simmons away. At least with the Harden trade, yes, you'd be giving up more, but you'd be getting a fantastic player back. You're not getting anything of value for Ben Simmons now. Daryl Morey's good at what he does, but you know what? That was a bad job by him. Ben Simmons will be traded. The question is where. I do want to make my pick for Clippers Suns. We're only one game into the series. It's not the end of the world to make a pick now. The only thing we know is that the Clippers won't sweep. I mean, I'll say this. That win yesterday was incredibly impressive. Forget the fact that Devin Booker had a triple-double. Forget the fact that DeAndre Ayton had 20. Forget the fact that 6 Suns scored at least 11 points. You put up 120 without Chris Paul. Now, I have no idea if Paul is going to play tomorrow. I know he's going to be back at some point in this series. But the fact that you were able to win this game without your second best player, that's really impressive. It's similar to the Clippers being without Kawhi Leonard, but we know that Paul George has talent. We didn't know that he could put it together in the playoffs, but we know that he has talent. He's a guy who puts up 20 points a game every year. So it's conceivable that he could step up. And he's done that. Give him credit. And give Terrence Mann credit, too, for taking over in Game 6. But who was going to step up for the Suns with Paul out? Devin Booker? No. It wouldn't be Booker stepping up. Booker didn't fill the Chris Paul role. Cameron Payne filled the Chris Paul role. Booker took on more of a shooting role and more of a passing role. He had more responsibility, but most of Paul's duties fell on Cameron Payne, and Payne stepped up big. 11 points and 9 assists, played very physical defense. That was easily one of the best games he's played in these playoffs. I mean, all the Suns chipped in and put together a very balanced attack. The Clippers didn't have that. Paul George had 34. Reggie Jackson stepped up. Give him credit. I like Reggie Jackson. And DeMarcus Cousins had a really good game off the bench. But the Suns seem to be gelling at the right time here. They're an incredibly well-balanced team. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. With Kawhi Leonard out for the whole series and Chris Paul due back at some point, I've got to pick the Suns. I'll say they win in 6 games. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Valk talk. And I'll start with Lightning Islanders. Like I said, after the second period, when the Islanders were up 3-0, I thought there's no way that they're going to blow this lead. I mean, I fully expected to pay more attention to the Nets game in that third period than the Islanders game, and I was in Uniondale. I'll say this. I'm glad I was in Uniondale rather than Brooklyn. The Islanders got me through Saturday night, let me tell you, because I was ticked off about the Nets. But every time I got too low, the Islanders brought me back to center. Look, after the Matt Martin goal, I said to my father, there will be a Game 6. Clear your calendar, we're definitely going on Wednesday. Not so fast. The Lightning scored 2 goals in the first 7 minutes of the third period. I mean, the Islanders were very passive. They were content to sit on their lead. They weren't too aggressive. The Lightning took advantage of that. They have a high-powered offense. And if you give them an inch, they'll take a foot. So after the Tyler Johnson goal, you know what? There's plenty of time for one. But what did I say? The Islanders play well in must-win games. They were down 2-1 against the Penguins. They won Game 4 in that series. The same thing happened against the Bruins. Would history repeat itself? It almost didn't. The waning moments of the third period, Ryan McDonagh spins past Brock Nelson. Semyon Varlamov goes out to attack McDonagh. McDonagh shoots the puck behind Varley. That puck should have gone in. But Ryan Pulock made one of the greatest plays in Islanders history. Think about the great moments in Islanders history. Tonelli to Nystrom. Mike Bossy's 50-50. Pat LaFontaine ending the Easter epic. The David Volek goal. The Sean Bates penalty shot. Fight night against the Penguins. And the Tavares wraparound. That save by Pulock is right up there. It's below Tonelli to Nystrom, because that won a Stanley Cup. Maybe it's not as impressive as the Easter epic, because if you end a long game, there's something extra to that. David Volek beating the back-to-back Stanley Cup winners. Okay, maybe it's not as good as that. But it's better than Bates. It's better than the Eric Cairns fight against Ty Domi in that same series. It's better than Fight Night. It's better than the Tavares wraparound. We're going to see that save for time immemorial. Some players in that situation would not block the net. They wouldn't have the presence of mind to. They would just stand around and watch the play. Oh, Nelson has this. Oh, Varley has this. By the time maybe they spring into gear, it's too late. McDonough scored. Tie game. Polak never stopped skating towards the net. And when he saw McDonough get to his backhand, he went down. Made himself big. Did what any good goalie would do. I mean, live time, I knew that Varley didn't stop it. I knew that he got deked. McDonough deked Nelson, and he deked Varley. Then I saw the puck go to the side of the net, and it's like, okay, an Islander just made an incredible save. It wasn't Varlamov. Who was it? Then they showed the play on the Jumbotron. It was Ryan Polak. If the Islanders go on to win the Stanley Cup, that moment is one of the more important moments in NHL history. I mean, realize, without that, it's a tie game. God only knows what's going to happen in overtime. Let me tell you, if I'm Ryan Polak, I'm having that as the homepage on my computer. I'm having that as my Twitter banner, my Twitter picture, the screensaver on my phone, my tablet. I may even have that in wallet size. That is an iconic moment. It's not at the NHL level yet, but at Islanders level, it is. And I'm not even ashamed to say that. Like, some people may say, oh, how pathetic is that? It didn't even happen in a Cup Finals. It won the Islanders Game 4 of the Stanley Cup semifinals. It wasn't a clinching game or anything, but you know what? I'd rather be tied 2-2 than down 3-1. No guarantee that the Islanders would have been down 3-1 if Polak didn't do that, but all the momentum would have been on the Lightning side. The crowd would have been out of it. I think it's a fair bet to say that the Lightning would have won that game. And the series would have been over. Now it's down to a best 2 out of 3. Whoever wins tonight is winning the whole thing. Like I said, the Islanders play well in must-win games. I think we'll win tonight. I really do. I think history will repeat itself. Moving on now to Golden Knights Canadiens. And you've got to tip your cap to Robin Lehner. The Habs thoroughly outplayed the Golden Knights all throughout that game. They got the better chances. They were more physical. They were better defensively. But Robin Lehner kept the Golden Knights in this game. And now that series is down to a best 2 out of 3. You get to go back to Vegas with your head held high. And I'm so happy that it was Lehner. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for Lehner. Had a really good year with the Islanders in 18-19. Was fantastic against the Penguins in that series. I love what he's done for mental health awareness. On a personal and a professional level, I'm a big fan of Robin Lehner. I'm really happy that he's the guy saving the Golden Knights here. And it was the right decision by Pete DeBoer to bench Fleury. After that terrible decision on the dump-in, you have no choice but to bench Fleury. Actions have consequences. That stupid action means that you can't start Game 4. And Lehner stood on his head. What's the one goal he gave up? A breakaway to Paul Byron. That wasn't his fault. That was a bad play by the Golden Knights defense. They had the puck deep in the Habs zone, then you blinked and Paul Byron's on a breakaway. The Golden Knights just fell apart there. But Lehner made an absolutely fantastic save on Cole Caulfield midway through the third period. It kept the Golden Knights in this game. A fantastic pass by Shea Theodore to Braden McNabb. McNabb shot that puck in the only place that Carey Price couldn't stop it. I don't know how that puck went in. That was a seeing eye goal. And then Nick Waugh, the guy who grew up not that far from Montreal, wins the game for the Golden Knights. Just keeps hacking at the puck, stays with it, gets Carey Price swimming, forces a Game 6. These two semifinals, Islanders Lightning and Canadiens Golden Knights, have been incredibly exciting series. There is no question that the NHL has more juice than the NBA right now. Hopefully, they sustain it. I mean, I'll tell you, it wouldn't surprise me if some of the casual NBA fans said, you know what, I'm not going to watch the conference finals. I'm more interested in these NHL series. That's how I feel. And I'm a diehard NBA fan. I'm a diehard NHL fan also, but I have a lot more interest in the NHL than the NBA right now. And I'm pretty sure that I'm in the majority there. There was a death in the hockey world that I really want to talk about, and that is the death of Tom Kurvers, who died today from lung cancer at the age of 58. From the mid-80s to the mid-90s, Tom Kurvers was one of the better offensive defensemen in the NHL. Was he as good as guys like Paul Coffey, Ray Borg, Al McGinnis, Phil Housley, Larry Murphy, Scott Stevens, and Chris Chelios? No. But once you got past that first tier, Kurvers was right up there with guys like Gary Suter and Jeff Brown and James Patrick and Steve Duchesne. Kurvers' rookie year in the NHL was 84-85. He had 45 points that year. He played in 75 games. The Habs made the playoffs that year. Kurvers was a point every other game player. The year after that, he took a little bit of a step back, still had 30 points, but it fell off from 45. The Habs traded him to the Sabres. Kurvers wasn't great there. He had 23 points in 55 games. The Sabres traded him to the Devils. See, the thing with Kurvers was he was a really good offensive defenseman, had a great shot, really good on the power play, but he wasn't great defensively. When you're a defenseman, you can be an offensive defenseman, but you've got to be able to produce defensively. Curvers was not great defensively. So while Curvers had 2 really good years for the Devils, in 87-88, he had 34 points in 56 games. And went on to score 15 points in 19 games for the 87-88 Devils. A Devils team that went all the way to the conference finals, but then lost to the Bruins in a Game 7. Teams would tire of him pretty quickly. Curvers went to the Maple Leafs in exchange for their first-round draft pick in 1991. With that first-rounder that they got from the Leafs, the Devils took Scott Niedermayer. That is how the Devils got Niedermayer. Because they traded Tom Curvers to the Leafs. Curvers had a good 89-90 season for the Leafs. He had 3 assists in 5 playoff games that year. He put up 52 points in 70 games. But then the year after that, his defensive play fell off a cliff. He was traded to the Canucks, had 27 points in 32 games. Then he made his way to the Islanders and put together 3 really good seasons for the Isles. Scored no less than 38 points. His first year with the Islanders, he was a minus 18, but his defense kept getting better and better. Al Arbor stuck with him. And he was an integral part of those Isles blue lines that had guys like Vladimir Malikov and Darius Kasparidis and Uwe Krupp. I know I butchered that name. I'm sorry, I can never get it right. I know I should know it because he's a former Islander, really good player. I just never got good with it. I mean, Tom Curvers was a better Islander than he was Canadian, Devils, Maple Leaf, etc., etc. If you were to make a list of the best Islanders defensemen in history, you could make an argument for Curvers to be in the top 25, top 30-ish. He was a really, really good Islander. After he retired, he got into the front office, was an assistant GM for the Wild, held that role up until his death. His name is on the Stanley Cup because the 1986 Canadiens did beat the Flames in the Cup final, but he didn't play in any playoff game that year. He was a really, really good offensive defenseman. If he could have improved his defensive game just a little bit even, Curvers could have been up there with guys like Chelios and Stevens and guys like that. May he rest in peace. New York Yankees show comes your way tonight. Brooklyn Nets offseason preview comes your way on Wednesday, way earlier than I wanted to do it, than I planned to do it. I mean, I have a prior engagement for tomorrow. That's why it has to be Wednesday. Regular episodes of The Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that it gets so cold here that ice feels warm compared to the air. I could go for that right about now, let me tell you.